Good morning. So last week we set our intentions through our white stone ceremony. How many of you were here for that? And how many of you were not here for that? All right, so if you were not here, you must have goals and some intention that you have set for yourself for 2015. And the tendency sometimes is we write these things down and maybe we just forget about them, right? And so I'd like to pick up on what our intentions, what our goals are for 2015 and ask the question, how is that going to be active in our lives this year? How can we use our spiritual power and self-mastery to bring our intentions into manifestation? Because this is where our spiritual practice begins, right? We place our intentions and then we go about our practices to bring them, help them manifest. In the book of Timothy, we read, "For God did not give us a spirit of timidity, but of power and love and self-control." So our focus this month is going to be on the spiritual faculty of power. Charles Fillmore wrote a book a number of years ago called The 12 Powers of Man, also the 12 Powers of Women. And basically, the 12 powers are a bit like the chakras, only there's 12 of them instead of 7. They're located in different parts of the body, and it is through the mastery of these powers that we bring our Christ consciousness into being. And so we'll be going through the 12 powers this year. It also will be a home study group that we're starting, and it's based on a book by Paul Hasselbeck called Powered Up. So when we think of power, we tend to think of worldly power, don't we? And worldly power comes from the ego, but spiritual power comes from our divinity. Worldly power, more often than not, takes the form of having control over something or someone or a group of people or a nation or whatever. And Abraham Lincoln said that if you want to see a man's true character, see how he handles power. See how she handles power. Have you ever seen anybody go a little crazy with a little bit of power? Of course, we've also seen people go crazy with a lot of power, too. And there are times in our lives when it's appropriate, right? When we are parents of small children or children, we need to have power over them. I babysat my step-grandson this week. He's not 2 yet. And, you have to watch them every moment because they put things in their mouth and they climb on things. And, it's like it's a task to keep them alive, when they're really little. And you have to exert your power over them to protect them. And sometimes when we're when our parents age, then the children have power over their parents. Look out. No. You may have to take over their finances, or you might have to make decisions for them. We have employers sometimes that have power over us, or the government. And so have you ever been in a situation in your life when someone misused their power against you? It doesn't feel good, does it? It's not a good feeling. Perhaps it's a parent or a boss. And I remember years ago when I was a wedding coordinator at Unity Village. And there were probably about 8 of us that worked in the department. And we work in twos where we would, get everything ready for the wedding and assist the minister and do all the different things that a coordinator does. And we worked together really well as a team. If one of us had another commitment, we would cover for each other. And, our supervisor was like, so long as you get your job done, I'm happy. Well, our supervisor, she was a ministerial student, was ordained and graduated. And so she was replaced with somebody else. And anyway, one weekend she scheduled me, and I couldn't work that weekend. So I called her up and I said, I can't work that weekend, but I can get Bev, someone else, to cover for me. And she says, no, you're not. And I said, well, I can, because, Bev said she's available, so she'll cover my shift, and then I'll do another one for her. And she said, no, you can't do that. And I said, why not? And she said, because I said so. Now, how long do you think People were happy working for this woman, right? How long do you think it lasted where we, who had been this cohesive team, all of a sudden were subject to this woman who had this little bit of power and was going a little bit crazy with it? And that is worldly power. That is power that comes from the ego. The truth is that power needs to be combined with the spiritual faculty of love. And when it's combined with the spiritual faculty of love, it is then that we have a superpower. We have superpowers within us. Gandhi said that power is of two kinds. One is obtained by the fear of punishment, and the other by the act of love. Power based on love is 1,000 times more effective and permanent than the one derived from fear of punishment. Agreed? Yeah. Gandhi led India into freedom from England. And although there were conflicts, of course, as there are in those kinds of situations, basically it was a peaceful experience. Not totally, but more than it normally is in those situations. The United States was formed because we rebelled against the power that England had over us. There are conflicts happening all over the world right now, and what are they all about? Power, right? Who's got the power? Who's got the control? The Pope has absolute power. In fact, I Googled it to see what power does the Pope have. And the Pope, his power extends over every single church, every single bishop and pastor, and every one of the faithful. So he basically has power over, everybody that's a Catholic. The Pope is the supreme judge, and to him belongs the last appeal in all cases. The Pope is independent of every temporal sovereign and of every spiritual power and responsible only to God. He is like Peter, right? So what's interesting is that Pope Francis, the current Pope, really is kind of approaching power in a different way, isn't he? In fact, he gave a speech on Christmas, before Christmas, and basically blasted the entire church and the whole community. They were expecting this nice, talk, because it's Christmas, and instead it was more like bah humbug, It said the Pope denounced the lust for power of ladder-climbing clerics, those who indulged in hypocritical double lives. He attacked what he called the terrorism of gossip. The Pope signaled early on that he aimed to overhaul and Interesting. So it's interesting how he has chosen to use his power, right? He has chosen to come in and totally upset everything and change it and bring it back perhaps to what it was, right? Power with love. And it's just interesting. It's like, well, maybe he won't live very long. No, he's setting it in. So spiritual power, then, is power that emanates from the soul rather than the ego. And spiritual power is not about controlling others, but it is rather about having dominion over one's own thoughts and feelings. It is about self-mastery. So when we have control over our own thoughts, guess what? We may not seek to make others do what we want them to do. Right? What's the saying? Be the change that you want to see in the world. If you don't like the way things are, then change. Don't go out that doesn't mean that we don't do anything, we don't take action, but that the first step is to look within and see if we have mastery over ourselves. Paul Hasselbeck, in his book, Powered Up, he suggests that there is underdeveloped power and overdeveloped power. So when we are in a place where we have undeveloped power, spiritual power within, then it feels like we have no control over our lives and we have no control over anything that happens. Ever been in that place or know anybody like that place? I know someone who she's filed for bankruptcy probably at least twice and heading that way for the third time. And she'll say things to me like, I just have so many credit card debt, I just don't know what to do. And, it's almost like someone else has her credit card and is charging all of these things, like she has no control or say over it, but she's the one who's doing it. And it's just interesting how sometimes we might put ourselves in this victim or weak place, yeah? Where it's like, well, I don't have any say, I don't have any control over anything. So that's when our spiritual power of is underdeveloped. When it's overdeveloped, guess what happens? I may have mastery over the things that I do, but guess what? I'm going to tell you how to do it too, because I am so good at this that I know what is best for you. Anybody know anybody like that? Have you ever done anything like that yourself? So when it's overdeveloped, we then assume that we can, just tell everybody else what to do. So we want to be in a place where power is connected with love, right? And where that real spiritual power then is, again, about ourselves. Paul Hasselbeck goes on to say that it is also the ability by which we have control and dominion over unwanted thoughts, feelings, and beliefs that may interfere and impede with our ability to master those ideas. So an example he gives is, suppose you need to learn something new. And the example he gives is like geometry. And you're afraid of geometry or you're afraid of math. You feel like there's no way I can handle this. In order to use spiritual powers to say, you know what, it's just geometry or it's just math and I can figure this out. Anytime we have a limiting belief that stops us from moving forward, that's when we need to call in our spiritual power. So when you think about the word that you have chosen or the intention that you have for 2015, my question to you is, do you have the power to bring that intention into manifestation? What do you think? For God did not give you a spirit of timidity, but God gave you a spirit of love and power and self-control. So when we look at our intention, I think a question we could have is there any part of you that doubts that you can manifest this? Is there any part of you that doubts that you deserve this? And if so, check in. So when I applied for ministerial school years ago, it was very competitive, and there were like over 100 people that would apply for 25 positions. And I was not definitely the most qualified person to apply. And when I applied for school, there were like 60 people invited back for interviews, and then they chose 25 from that. And what I remember was, because I lived in Kansas City at the time, was there was a lot of fear around who would those 25 people be? Who would be the ones who would get to be invited into the ministerial school program? And I remember staying away from the fear and all the talk that people would have about who's qualified and who isn't. And there's only 25 spots. And I remember thinking, you know what, I don't need 25 spots. I only need one. I just need one spot. And what it did is it helped me to disengage from the limiting belief and the fear that there wasn't enough, to recognize that, yeah, there is enough. That is all I need is one spot. And I was invited in. The power center is located in the back of the throat. Not surprising, because our power is in our words, isn't it? Our power is in our words. And when you are focusing on what the intention is, think about how you say it and how you verbalize it. When I was in Zaire in the 70s, and one of the greetings in one of the towns for saying hello was mbota. And so once I learned the word, it's like, okay, now I got it. And I remember walking down the road, and someone was coming from the other side and said, mbota. And I said, oh, mbota. And he stood there and he said, mbota. And I said, Mbota. And he said, Mbota. And I said, Mbota. And it's like, okay. And then he just went on. And what I learned was when I was being meek and quiet and he didn't hear me, it was like, I don't know if I was being insulting or I don't know, but it was like he didn't hear me and not just him, but anyone else. So whenever I met anyone along the road, it was Mbota, with power and with strength, and it was acknowledging them. So we have great power with our words, yeah? We have great power. I mean, how do we bring the world into manifestation? Through our thoughts and our words and our actions, yeah? So I think what I would like to do for a moment is to just practice hearing our own voice, because it's, and just imagine that as we're going to do some oming, that once we do this, that you're activating and engaging the power center, which is in the back of your voice. And I'd really like you to join in, and I'd like you to play with it. So to try different tones, you know, like when we om, it's the word is actually like A-U-M. And let me just practice it for a minute. So it's a real deep breath, and it's coming from the diaphragm. And what you'll notice is that as we do it a few times, it'll gain in strength. It might start off weak, but it'll gain in strength. And as we do it, I invite you to listen to the other sounds around you, the other voices around you, and to carry it out in the long breath. I know many of you have experience with oming. This is not something that is new. So I'd like you to sit up. And just taking a deep breath. And on the exhale, three more times. Emanate from the sound of Om, that it was the very first sound ever to be uttered. And there's a more peaceful feeling in the room, isn't there? There's a more grounded feeling. So the truth is, every single one of us has within us superpowers. And the superpower is when we combine power and love. And when we do this, there isn't anything that can stop us. So what was your intention? Breathe the Om into your intention, because you have that power to bring it into manifestation. For God did not give you a spirit of timidity, but a spirit of power and love and self-control. So go forth and be powerful. Amen.